The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It came down in slow, deliberate sheets, soaking deep into the soil of southern Louisiana, turning narrow dirt paths into slick ribbons of mud and waking the ancient swamp to something restless. The locals in Lafourche Parish had begun to whisper again, the way they only did when the weather turned wrong, when the air felt heavier than it should, when the cicadas went quiet, and when the bayou seemed to breathe. No one spoke openly about the Delacroix case anymore. Not for decades. But the rain had a way of loosening memories. Ethan Cole arrived just after sunset, his tires crunching over gravel as he pulled up to a crooked, nearly abandoned sheriff's station that leaned slightly to one side like it was tired of standing. He stepped out of his car, the humid air wrapping around him instantly, thick with the smell of wet wood, algae, and something faintly rotten beneath it all. He adjusted his coat and looked out toward the tree line. The cypress trees stood like silent witnesses, their long, skeletal branches draped in Spanish moss that swayed gently despite the lack of wind. He had come for a story. A forgotten case, buried in time and fear. Inside, the station was dimly lit, a single flickering fluorescent tube buzzing overhead. Behind the counter sat an older man with a face carved from years of heat and regret. Sheriff Dalton, according to the nameplate. He looked up slowly as Ethan approached. "You're not from around here," the sheriff said without asking. "No," Ethan replied. "I'm a journalist. I'm looking into an old case. The Delacroix disappearance." The silence that followed felt wrong. Not empty, heavy. Sheriff Dalton leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan like he was trying to decide whether he was foolish or already doomed. "That case is closed," he said finally. "So I've heard. But I also heard it was never solved." Dalton's jaw tightened. Some things don't need solving. Some things just need forgetting. Ethan placed a folder on the counter and slid it forward. Old photographs spilled out, grainy images of a small wooden house deep in the swamp, a family of 3 smiling stiffly at the camera, and one final photo, the house again, but abandoned, its windows dark, its door hanging open. "The Delacroix family vanished in 1978, Ethan said. "No signs of struggle. No bodies. Just gone. And after that, there were reports. People hearing voices in the swamp. Lights at night. Something moving where nothing should be." Dalton didn't look at the photos. "You should leave," he said quietly. "I can't." "Then at least don't go out there." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's exactly where I'm going." Dalton finally leaned forward, his eyes sharp now. "You don't understand. That place." He stopped himself, exhaling slowly. "The swamp keeps what it takes." Ethan gathered his photos. "Then I guess I'll have to ask it nicely." He left before the sheriff could say anything else. By the time he reached the edge of the bayou, night had fully settled in. The world beyond his headlights was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound as much as light. He parked near a narrow wooden dock that creaked under his weight as he stepped onto it. A small motorboat was tied to the post, just as the rental contact had promised. The engine sputtered to life reluctantly, and Ethan guided the boat into the narrow waterway, the beam of his flashlight cutting a thin path through the darkness. The swamp closed in around him almost immediately, the trees forming a tangled canopy overhead. It didn't take long before he started hearing things. At first, it was just the usual sounds, frogs croaking, insects humming, the occasional splash of something slipping beneath the water's surface. Then came something else, a whisper, soft, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of leaves. Ethan froze, his hand tightening on the throttle. He turned off the engine. The sudden silence was suffocating. And then he heard it again. "Ethan!" His breath caught. He swung the flashlight around wildly, the beam shaking as it illuminated nothing but trees and water and drifting moss. "That's not funny," he muttered, though he was alone. He turned the engine back on, faster this time, pushing deeper into the bayou. It took nearly 40 minutes before he found it. The house. It stood exactly as it had in the photographs, raised on wooden stilts above the murky water, its structure warped and sagging with age. The windows were black voids, and the front door hung open, creaking softly as it moved with an unseen rhythm. Ethan tied the boat to one of the posts and climbed onto the narrow walkway leading up to the house. Every step echoed. Inside, the air was stale and thick, layered with decades of decay. Dust coated everything, yet somehow, there were no cobwebs. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was the smell. Not just rot, but something metallic. Like old blood. He moved slowly through the rooms, his flashlight revealing overturned furniture, peeling wallpaper, and faint stains on the wooden floorboards that seemed too dark to be just water damage. Then he found the photographs. Dozens of them, scattered across a table in what must have been the living room. But these weren't the same ones he had seen before. These were different. Each photo showed the same scene, the swamp outside the house. But in every image, something had changed. At first, it was subtle, a shadow where there hadn't been one before. A shape in the distance. Then, as he flipped through them, the figure became clearer. Tall, thin, standing just beyond the tree line. Watching. In the final photograph, it stood right at the edge of the porch. Ethan slowly turned around. The doorway behind him was empty. But the air had changed. The temperature had dropped, and the silence had deepened into something oppressive. He wasn't alone anymore. A soft creak came from the hallway. Then another. Footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging. Ethan raised his flashlight toward the sound, his hand trembling. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely steady. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, a voice. Not a whisper this time. Clear, close. "You came back." Ethan's blood ran cold. I've never been here before," he said. A soft, broken laugh echoed from the darkness. "Yes, you have." The flashlight flickered, and in that brief stutter of light, he saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. Too tall, its limbs too long, bending at unnatural angles. Its face, there was no face. Just a smooth, pale surface where features should have been. Ethan stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. "What are you?" he whispered. The thing tilted its head slowly. We waited. The walls creaked. The floor shifted beneath him. And suddenly, the house didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt occupied, filled. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping, surrounding him from every direction. "Stay, don't leave, we remember." Ethan ran. He didn't care where, just away from that thing. He burst out onto the porch, gasping for air, the rain hitting his face like a shock. The boat. He needed to get to the boat. But as he reached the edge of the walkway, he stopped. The water below wasn't still anymore. It was moving, churning, and from beneath its dark surface, shapes were rising. Hands. Dozens of them, pale, bloated, reaching up toward him. The whispers turned into screams. He staggered back, his mind unraveling. "This isn't real," he said. "This isn't real." Behind him, the door creaked open. "You left us." Ethan turned slowly. The figure stood in the doorway now. Closer, taller, and behind it, more shapes. More figures, emerging from the darkness. Inside the house, all faceless, all watching. "We waited," they said in unison. "For so long." Ethan's vision blurred. His heart pounded against his ribs like it was trying to escape. "What do you want?" he shouted. The thing stepped forward. "We want you to remember." And then, everything went black. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Sheriff Dalton stood at the edge of the dock, staring out at the still waters of the bayou. Ethan's car was still there. But the boat was gone. He sighed, rubbing his face. Another one. He had warned him. But they never listened. No one ever did. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A photograph, lying on the wooden planks of the dock. He bent down and picked it up. It showed the old house in the swamp. And standing on the porch, a group of figures. Tall, faceless, and among them, a new one. A man, frozen mid-scream. Sheriff Dalton closed his eyes. Then he dropped the photograph into the water. It sank slowly, disappearing into the dark below. But even after it was gone, the surface rippled. As if something beneath had moved. And far out in the bayou, where the trees grew thickest and the light never fully reached, something watched. Waiting. For the next one to come looking. Because the swamp never forgets. And it never lets go. The water did not stay still for long. Sheriff Dalton had barely taken a few steps away from the dock when the surface of the bayou behind him rippled again, this time harder, more deliberate, as if something large had shifted beneath it. He paused, his back still turned, his shoulders stiffening as a familiar dread crept up his spine. For a moment, he considered walking away. That's what he had done every other time. But something about this felt different. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned back. The water had gone calm again. Too calm. Dalton stepped closer to the edge of the dock, squinting into the murky darkness below. The reflection of the pale morning sky shimmered faintly across the surface, broken only by drifting patches of algae. Then he saw it. Not a shape, not movement, a face. Just beneath the surface. Distorted by the water, pale and stretched, but unmistakably human. Dalton's breath caught. "No," he whispered. The face didn't move. It simply stared upward, its eyes wide, its mouth slightly open as if frozen in the middle of a scream. Ethan. Before Dalton could react, the water exploded upward. A hand shot out, grabbing the edge of the dock with a wet, violent slap. Dalton stumbled back, nearly falling as another hand followed, then another, dragging a soaked, trembling body up from the depths. Ethan collapsed onto the wood, coughing violently, water spilling from his mouth as his body convulsed. Dalton rushed forward. Jesus! Ethan's hand snapped out, gripping Dalton's arm with unnatural strength. Don't! Ethan gasped. Don't let them. His voice broke into a choking cough. Dalton pulled him farther from the edge. Easy, son. You're all right. You're out. Ethan's eyes darted wildly, unfocused, as if he were seeing something that wasn't there. No, no, I'm not out, he whispered. Dalton froze. There was something wrong with Ethan's voice. Not just fear. Something deeper. Something layered. As if it didn't belong to just him. Listen to me, Dalton said firmly. You're safe now. Ethan slowly turned his head. For a split second, just a flicker, his expression changed. His face went completely still. Empty. Then he smiled. It wasn't his smile. Too wide. Too slow. They're here too, he said softly. Dalton felt the blood drain from his face. What did you say? Ethan's grip tightened. You shouldn't have come back, he whispered. The air shifted. The warmth of the morning seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold that didn't belong in the Louisiana heat. Dalton turned toward the tree line. The cypress trees stood as they always had, but now, something stood among them. Tall shapes. Thin. Unmoving. Watching. Dalton's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but he already knew it wouldn't matter. It never had. Ethan, he said slowly, what did you bring back with you? Ethan's eyes filled with something that almost looked like tears. I didn't bring anything, he said. A pause. Then, barely audible, they followed. The sound came next. That same whispering. Low. Overlapping. Coming from everywhere at once. We remember. We waited. Dalton stepped back, pulling Ethan with him. We need to get out of here. Now. But Ethan didn't move. He was staring at the water again. No, he said. Dalton frowned. What? They're not done. The surface of the bayou began to ripple again. Wider this time, spreading outward in slow, circular waves. Then, hands. Dozens of them, breaking through the surface all at once. Grabbing, reaching, pulling themselves upward. Dalton stumbled back, drawing his gun and firing instinctively into the water. The shots echoed through the swamp, but did nothing. The hands kept coming, more and more, and then the bodies followed. Pale figures dragging themselves onto the shore, their movements jerky and unnatural, their faces blank and smooth. Faceless. Just like the ones in the house. Ethan let out a broken sound. I tried to leave, he said. I really did. One of the figures tilted its head toward him. Then another. Then all of them. In perfect unison. You did leave, they said together. Their voices layered, echoing, wrong. But you came back. Dalton grabbed Ethan, forcing him to his feet. We're going. They ran. Through the mud, past the trees, back toward the station. But the swamp didn't feel the same anymore. It felt closer. Tighter. Like it was closing in around them. The whispers followed. The footsteps too. Not just behind them, beside them. Everywhere. By the time they reached the station, Dalton was out of breath, his heart pounding violently. He slammed the door shut behind them, locking it. For a moment, there was silence. Just the sound of their breathing. Then, a soft knock. From the other side of the door. Dalton froze. Ethan slowly looked up. Another knock. Gentle. Patient. Dalton stepped back, shaking his head. No, 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 the handle began to turn. Slowly. Creaking. Ethan whispered, they don't need doors. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, shapes. Moving. Forming. Surrounding them. Dalton raised his gun, firing blindly. The muzzle flashes lit the room in brief, violent bursts, and in each flash, more of them appeared. Closer. Closer. Until finally, right in front of him. A tall figure leaned down, its featureless face inches from his own. You remember now, it said. The last shot echoed. Then silence. Hours later, when the sun stood high in the sky, a passing patrol unit stopped outside the sheriff's station. The door was open. Inside, the place was empty. No sign of Dalton. No sign of Ethan. Just water. Covering the floor. Dripping from the walls. And scattered across the room, photographs. Dozens of them, all showing the same thing. The bayou, the house, the figures, and in the newest photos, 2 more had joined them. Standing still, faceless, watching, waiting, just like the rest, because the swamp had grown. And it was still hungry. The photographs did not stay where they were. By the time the patrol officer stepped fully inside, the water had already begun to recede, slowly pulling back across the wooden floor as if being drawn somewhere unseen. The air was thick, suffocating, carrying that same metallic scent that clung to the old house in the swamp. Officer Reyes hesitated at the doorway. Something about the silence felt wrong. Not empty, watching. Sheriff, he called out cautiously. No response. Only the faint drip, drip of water falling from the ceiling. He moved further in, his boots leaving wet prints across the floor. The photographs caught his attention almost immediately. They were scattered everywhere, some face up, others half soaked, curling at the edges. He picked one up. It showed the bayou, still, lifeless. But in the background, between the trees, there they were. Tall shapes. Too tall. Standing where nothing should be. Reyes frowned, flipping to another photo. This one was closer. The figures clearer. And in the center, 2 of them stood slightly apart. Something about them felt different. More defined. More recent. He leaned closer. And that's when he noticed it. One of them was wearing a sheriff's badge. Reyes dropped the photo like it burned. Okay. No, he muttered under his breath. This wasn't right. None of this was right. He reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Reyes. I'm at the station. There's no sign of Sheriff Dalton or the missing civilian. Requesting backup. Static. Loud. Piercing. Then, a voice. Stay, Reyes froze. Dispatch, he said sharply. The radio crackled again. Don't leave, his grip tightened. Who is this? The voice didn't answer. Instead, it multiplied, layering over itself. We remember. Reyes backed toward the door, his pulse racing. I'm leaving, he said aloud, as if saying it would make it real. As if something needed to hear it. The moment he stepped outside, the air felt heavier. Hotter. The sky above had darkened again, thick storm clouds rolling in unnaturally fast. The bayou, just beyond the tree line, looked different. Closer. He could hear it now. Water shifting, moving, calling. Reyes shook his head and hurried toward his patrol car. But he stopped halfway. There, in the mud, footprints. Dozens of them, leading away from the station. But not normal footprints. They were too long, too narrow, and spaced unevenly, as if whatever made them didn't walk quite right. They led back toward the swamp. Of course they did. Reyes swallowed hard. Then he noticed something else. Among those strange, elongated prints, a normal set. Fresh. Barefoot. He crouched slightly, his breath catching. The toes were splayed. The heel dug deep into the mud. As if whoever made them had been dragged. Pulled. Back toward the water. No. Reyes whispered. The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the trees. And with it, that sound again. Whispering. Closer this time. Right behind him. You saw. Reyes spun around. Nothing. Just the empty road stretching back into town. But when he turned back, the footprints had changed. They were no longer leading away. They were leading toward him. One step closer than before. Then another. Slowly. Deliberately. Appearing in real time. As if something invisible was walking straight toward him. Reyes stumbled back, his hand flying to his gun. Stop. He shouted. The footprints stopped. Right at the edge of his boots. For a moment, everything went still. Then, a wet imprint formed directly in front of him. As if something had stepped down hard into the mud. Reyes fired. The gunshot shattered the silence. Birds burst from the trees. But the thing in front of him didn't move. Didn't react. Another step. Closer. Reyes fired again. And again. Until the gun clicked empty. The final footprint appeared inches from his own. Then, nothing. Silence. The wind died. The whispers faded. Reyes stood there, trembling, his chest heaving. It's gone, he said, though he didn't believe it. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his gun. And that's when he felt it. A hand, cold, wet, resting gently on his shoulder. Reyes's eyes widened. A voice leaned close to his ear. Soft, almost kind. You're next. Everything went dark. By the time backup finally arrived hours later, the storm had passed again. The road was empty. The patrol car still sat where Reyes had left it. Engine off. Door open. Inside the station, the water had returned. Deeper this time, covering the floor completely. Floating on its surface, more photographs. Hundreds now. All identical. All showing the same scene. The swamp. The house. The figures. But they were no longer standing still. In these photos, they were closer. Moving. Leaving the porch. Stepping into the water. And in the newest image, they were no longer in the swamp. They stood on the road. Near the station. Among them, 3 new figures. A journalist. A sheriff. And a patrol officer. All faceless. All still. All part of it now. And in the background of the final photograph, barely visible through the trees, was something bigger. Something watching them. Something that hadn't come forward yet. Because whatever lived in the bayou, was still waiting. And it was finally learning how to leave. The first person to notice something was wrong outside the parish wasn't a cop. It was a truck driver. He had been on the road just before dawn, hauling cargo along the long stretch of highway that cut through the outskirts of the wetlands. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving behind a thin fog that clung low to the ground, drifting across the asphalt in slow, ghost-like waves. He would later say that the road looked different. Too quiet, too empty. No birds, no insects, nothing. Then he saw them, standing just off the side of the road. At first, he thought they were people, maybe stranded, maybe waiting for help. There were several of them, spaced unevenly along the tree line, perfectly still. He slowed the truck, flashed his headlights. No reaction. Hey, he shouted out the window as he rolled closer. That's when he noticed something wasn't right. They weren't moving, not even slightly. And as the truck drew nearer, the headlights washed over them fully. There were no faces. Just smooth, pale surfaces where eyes and mouths should have been. The truck driver slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched. The engine roared. But the figures didn't flinch. Didn't step back. Didn't blink. They just stood there, watching, even without eyes. The driver fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking violently as he tried to dial. There's people out here, he stammered. Something's wrong with them. A loud bang cut him off. He froze. It had come from behind him. From inside the truck. Slowly, trembling, he turned his head. In the reflection of the side mirror, someone was sitting in the back seat. Tall. Too tall. Its head bent at an unnatural angle to fit inside the cab. Its smooth, blank face turned slowly toward him. The line went dead. By the time authorities found the truck, it was still parked in the middle of the road. Engine running. Door wide open. No driver. No struggle. Just a single photograph lying on the seat. The same as all the others. The swamp. The house. The figures. And one more added. Sitting inside the truck. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. The disappearances didn't stop. They spread. At first, it was only those who went near the bayou. Curious locals. Officers. Search teams. Then it became anyone who saw the photographs. Anyone who listened too closely to the recordings. Anyone who heard the whispers. It didn't matter where they were. Miles away. Cities away. The swamp had found a way to reach them. Phones began to malfunction. Radios filled with static. Televisions flickered with distorted images of dark water and tangled trees, even when turned off. And always, that whisper. We remember, people started reporting figures in reflections. In mirrors. In windows at night. Standing just behind them. Not moving. Not blinking. Waiting. The case was escalated quickly, though no one could agree on what it actually was. Missing persons. Mass hysteria. Something else. Entire teams were sent in. Specialists. Investigators. None of them came back. What returned instead were more photographs. Always the same. Always changing. The final attempt to contain it came quietly. A decision made far above the local level. The area surrounding the bayou was sealed off. Roadblocks. Fences. Armed patrols. No one in. No one out. Officially, it was declared a hazardous environmental zone. Unofficially, everyone knew. It was something else. But even that didn't work. Because by then, it wasn't just in the swamp anymore. It had spread too far. The first major incident outside Louisiana happened nearly a month later. A small town hundreds of miles away. No connection. No reason. Except for one thing. A teenage boy had found an image online. A blurry, low-resolution photograph shared on an obscure forum. He downloaded it, looked at it, zoomed in, and that was enough. That night, his parents reported hearing movement in his room. Soft footsteps. Slow pacing. When they opened the door, the room was empty. The window was closed, locked from the inside. On his desk, a printed photograph. Clearer now. Detailed. The swamp. The house. The figures. And one more. standing in a bedroom, looking directly out of the image. After that, it escalated faster. Too fast. Entire neighborhoods reported sightings. Figures standing at the ends of streets. On rooftops. At the far edges of parking lots. Always distant. Always watching. But getting closer. Day by day. Step by step. Governments tried to suppress it. Remove the images. Shut down the reports. But it didn't matter. Because people weren't just seeing it anymore. They were hearing it. In their homes. In their dreams. Even in complete silence. You remember now, the phrase began appearing everywhere. Written on walls. Scratched into glass. Typed across screens with no one touching the keyboard. No one could explain it. No one could stop it. And then, the photographs changed again. For the first time, they weren't centered on the swamp. The new images showed cities. Streets. Crowds. Normal places. Except they weren't normal anymore. Because hidden among the people, were the figures. Standing still. Faceless. Blending in. Waiting. And in every new image, they were closer to the viewer. Closer to whoever was looking at the photo. As if the act of seeing them, was bringing them nearer. The final report that was ever written about the case was never officially released. It was found later. Unfinished. Corrupted. But one line remained readable. Just one. If you are seeing this, do not look at the images. Do not listen to the voices. Do not respond. Below it, something else had been added. Not typed. Not printed. But carved into the page itself. Deep. Violent. 3 simple words. Too late now. Because by then, there was no distance left. No barrier. No safe place. The swamp was no longer a place. It was something else. Something that existed wherever it was remembered. And now, people didn't need to go looking for it anymore. Because it had already found them. And if you're hearing this, if you're imagining it, the trees, the water, the figures standing just out of sight, then you've already done the one thing you weren't supposed to do. You remembered. And somewhere, not far from you, something has just taken a step closer. Very quietly. Very slowly. So you won't hear it. Until it's right behind you. At first, nothing happens. That's the worst part. After the stories spread, after the images begin to circulate, after the whispers creep into the edges of people's thoughts, there is a pause. A quiet stretch of time where everything seems normal again. Too normal. The kind of normal that feels staged. People go back to work. Schools reopen. Roads fill with traffic. News stations stop mentioning the disappearances, replacing them with safer, easier stories. It almost works. Almost. But there are small things. Tiny fractures in reality that most people ignore. A reflection that lags half a second too long. A voice on the phone that repeats words before they're spoken. Shadows that don't match the direction of the light. And then there are the gaps. Moments people can't explain. Lost time. Someone standing in their kitchen, suddenly realizing they don't remember walking there. A child found sitting in the middle of a room, staring at nothing, whispering softly to themselves. When asked who they're talking to, they always give the same answer. They're teaching me. No one knows what that means. No one wants to. The first major break comes from a recording. Recovered from a damaged body camera worn by one of the last officers sent into the restricted zone. The footage is incomplete, corrupted in places, filled with static, but what remains is enough. Enough to make people wish it had been lost entirely. It begins with the officer walking through the swamp. Daytime. Bright. But the light doesn't seem to reach the ground properly. It feels dim. Filtered. Wrong. His breathing is steady at first, controlled. He's speaking into the radio, giving routine updates. Then he stops. The camera tilts slightly. What is that? He says. There's nothing visible at first. Just trees. Water. Moss. Then the image distorts. Flickers. And for a single frame, something appears between the trees. Tall. Thin. Watching. The officer starts moving faster. Control. I have visual confirmation of. Static cuts him off. The whispering begins shortly after. Faint. Barely audible. But it's there. Layered beneath everything. Growing louder with each step. The officer starts to panic. I'm not alone out here, he says. I repeat, I am not. The sound of water splashing interrupts him. Close. Too close. He turns abruptly, the camera swinging wildly, and then it catches something behind him. Not clearly. Not fully. Just a glimpse. A pale shape moving too fast to follow. The officer runs. Branches snap. Water churns beneath his feet. His breathing becomes frantic. They're everywhere, he gasps. I can't. He trips. falls hard. The camera hits the ground, tilting upward. For a moment, all you can see is the canopy above. Dark, twisted. Then, a figure steps into view. Slowly, deliberately. It stands over him, blocking out what little light there was. The officer tries to crawl backward. No, no, please, the figure tilts its head. And though it has no face, you can feel it looking at him. Studying him, learning. Then it speaks. Not in a whisper this time. Not layered. Just one clear voice. You see us. The officer shakes his head violently. I won't remember, he says. I won't. The figure leans closer. You already do. The camera glitches violently. The image tears. Fragments. Frames overlapping. And in those broken pieces, more figures appear. Dozens. Surrounding him. Reaching down. The final seconds of the footage are almost impossible to watch. The officer screaming. The whispers rising into something louder. Not voices anymore. Something deeper. Something ancient. Then, silence. The recording ends. But that's not what made it spread. It's what was found at the very end. Hidden in the last frame. Barely visible. But once seen, impossible to ignore. Behind the figure. Far in the distance. Something else. Something bigger. Not standing among the trees, but above them. A shape so massive it blends into the sky itself. Unmoving. Watching everything. Watching all of it unfold. Watching you. After that recording leaked, everything changed. The containment efforts collapsed completely. Because now, it wasn't just about the figures anymore. There was something behind them. Something controlling them. Something that didn't need to move. Didn't need to chase. Because it was already everywhere the memory existed. The whispers changed after that. Subtly. But enough. They weren't asking people to stay anymore. They weren't begging. They were guiding. Look closer, see clearly, people began reporting dreams. Not nightmares. Not exactly. More like lessons. They would stand in the swamp. Feel the water around their feet. Hear the voices, calm and steady. Showing them things, shapes, patterns, movements. How to stand. How to be still. How to watch. When they woke up, something was different. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They just understood. The next photographs confirmed it. The figures were no longer random. They were organized, positioned with purpose, spread across different locations, watching specific places, specific people, and in the newest images, some of them were no longer faceless. Not completely. Faint features had begun to form. Blurry, incomplete, but human, almost, as if they were learning how to become something else. Or how to become us. The final shift happens quietly. So quietly that most people don't notice it at all. One day, the whispers stop. Completely. No more voices. No more sounds. Just silence. A deep, absolute silence that settles over everything. And for a brief moment, people feel relief. It's over. It has to be. But then, they notice something else. The reflections are gone. Not distorted. Not delayed. Gone. Mirrors show empty rooms. Windows reflect nothing. Cameras fail to capture faces properly. At first, it's dismissed as glitches. Malfunctions. But the truth spreads quickly. People aren't losing their reflections. They're being replaced. Because now, when someone looks into a mirror, something looks back. Not moving. Not reacting. Just standing there. Still. Watching. Perfectly still. Waiting. And behind it, just barely visible, the outline of trees. The faint shimmer of water. The shape of something vast and unmoving beyond it all. Something that no longer needs the swamp. Because now, the swamp is everywhere. And the figures, they're not coming closer anymore. They've already arrived. They're standing in homes, in streets, in empty rooms, in the spaces just out of sight. Perfectly still, perfectly patient, learning, becoming. And if you haven't seen one yet, if you think you're safe, then you haven't looked closely enough. Because the final part of the story was never written. It didn't need to be. It's happening now, quietly, all around you. And the next time you catch something in the corner of your eye, something that doesn't move when you turn to look, don't ignore it. Don't pretend it isn't there. Because that's how it begins. Not with a sound, not with a scream, but with stillness. And once you notice it, truly notice it, it will notice you too. And it will not look away. Not ever again. At some point, people stop trying to escape it. Not because they believe they can't, but because something inside them changes. The fear doesn't disappear. It just dulls. Like a constant noise that the mind slowly learns to ignore. The world continues, but it feels thinner now, like something essential has been peeled away. Conversations feel hollow. Laughter sounds delayed. Even sunlight seems weaker, as if it's passing through something before reaching the ground. And everywhere, people begin to stand still. Not all at once. Not obviously. It starts small. Someone pauses in the middle of a sentence, and doesn't finish it. A man stands at a bus stop long after the bus has come and gone. A woman freezes while unlocking her door, her hand resting on the knob for minutes, then hours. At first, others try to help. They call their names, shake them, plead with them, but the ones who stand still don't respond. They don't resist either. They just remain there, breathing, alive, but no longer present. And if you look closely, really closely, you'll notice something else. They're not just standing. They're facing something. Always. A wall, a window, an empty corner. Something that isn't there. Or at least, something that shouldn't be. Hospitals fill quickly. Rooms lined with people standing motionless, eyes open, unblinking. Doctors run tests, brain scans, neurological exams. Everything comes back normal. Perfectly normal. Except for one thing. Every single one of them shows heightened activity in the same region of the brain, the part responsible for recognition. As if they are all looking at something they understand completely. Something familiar. Something they remember. But when doctors try to follow their gaze, there's nothing there. Nothing visible. Nothing recordable. Nothing real. And yet, the longer someone stays near them, the more they begin to feel it too. That pull. That awareness. That sense that something is standing just beyond perception. Watching. Waiting. One doctor, Halvorsen, made the mistake of studying them too closely. He isolated one patient, a young woman who had been found standing in the middle of her apartment, facing a blank wall for nearly 12 hours straight. He set up cameras, sensors, monitors, everything he could think of. Then he sat with her. And he watched. For the first hour, nothing happened. For the second, he began to feel uncomfortable. By the third, he noticed the temperature had dropped. Slightly. But enough. By the fourth, he started hearing something. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like pressure. A sensation at the edge of thought. Like a word forming but never quite spoken. He checked the equipment. Everything was normal. The patient hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, hadn't even shifted her breathing. And yet, the room didn't feel empty anymore. Doctor. Halvorsen leaned forward. Who are you looking at? He asked softly. No response. But her eyes, they shifted. Just slightly. Not toward him. Past him. To something behind him. He froze. Slowly. Carefully, he turned around. The room was empty. Of course it was. It had to be. But when he turned back, the woman was smiling. A slow, unnatural smile that stretched too wide across her face. Her lips parted. And for the first time, she spoke. They're not behind you, doctor. Halvorsen's throat tightened. What? He whispered. Her eyes locked onto his. Clear. Focused. Present. They're where you'll look next. The lights flickered. Just once. And in that brief moment of darkness, he saw it. Not with his eyes. Not exactly. But he saw it. A shape. Vast. Endless. Stretching beyond the room, beyond the building, beyond everything, watching him. Understanding him. Remembering him. The lights came back on. The room was normal again. The woman had returned to stillness. Her smile gone. Her gaze fixed once more on the empty wall. Doctor. Halvorsen stumbled back, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. No, he whispered. No, I didn't, but he had. He knew he had. Because now, he could feel it. Not outside, not around him, but inside. A presence. Quiet, patient. He left the room immediately. Shut down the experiment. Filed his report. But it didn't matter. Because that night, he didn't go home. He didn't call anyone. He didn't try to warn anyone. He simply stood. In his office. Facing the wall. Perfectly still. By the next morning, 3 more doctors had done the same. Then 5 nurses. Then an entire ward. It spread faster after that. Not like before. Not through images. Not through sound. But through attention. Through awareness. Through that single, irreversible act, noticing. Understanding. Remembering. And once someone reached that point, there was no fear left. No panic. No resistance. Just acceptance. Because they weren't being taken. They were joining. The final stage wasn't transformation. It wasn't replacement. It was alignment. People didn't disappear anymore. They remained exactly where they were. Standing. Facing. Watching. Just like the figures had always done. The difference was, now there was no way to tell them apart. Not anymore. Because the faces, the expressions, the bodies, all of it remained. Only one thing changed. Stillness. Perfect, unnatural stillness. And if you walk through certain places now, hospitals, homes, empty streets, you might see them. Standing there, silent, unmoving, watching something you can't see. And if you make the mistake of following their gaze, of trying to understand what they see, then you'll feel it too. That shift, that quiet realization, that moment where everything clicks into place. Where the world finally makes sense. And you remember, not just the swamp, not just the figures, but something older, something that was always there. Waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood, because it was never about taking people. It was about showing them, teaching them, helping them remember what they had forgotten. And once you remember, truly remember, there's no reason to move anymore. No reason to speak, no reason to run, because you finally understand your place. Where you've always belonged, standing, watching, waiting, just like the rest. And somewhere, in every direction, it watches too. Through them, through you, through everything, completely still, completely aware. Forever. World. Something that had always kept people from seeing what was really there. And now, that barrier is gone. Completely. The final realization isn't terrifying. That's the cruelest part. It's calm, peaceful, certain, a quiet understanding that settles deeper than fear ever could. Because you finally understand what you are. What everything is. Not separate, not individual, but part of something larger. Something that has been watching through you since the beginning. Waiting for you to notice. Waiting for you to remember. And once you do, there is no resistance left. No reason for it. You don't fall. You don't change. You simply stop. Stand still. Lift your head. And look. Join the others. Not as something taken. Not as something lost. But as something returned. And the world, what little movement remains, fades into silence. Not empty silence. Not absence. But presence. Complete. Endless. Watching itself. Through countless still forms. Through countless quiet minds. Through you. And somewhere. Everywhere. It continues. Not growing. Not spreading. Just being. As it always has. As it always will. Unmoving. Unblinking. Unending. And if there is still a part of you that hasn't looked, hasn't understood, then hold on to that. As long as you can. Because the moment you do, the moment your eyes finally lift, the moment you truly see, you won't feel fear. You won't feel pain. You won't feel anything at all. Just stillness. Perfect. Eternal stillness. And then, you will finally stop moving too. Time stops meaning anything after that. Not in the way people used to imagine. No frozen clocks, no dramatic collapse of the world, but in something quieter, far more disturbing. Time continues, technically. The sun rises. The sun sets. Days pass. But nothing changes. Not really. The people who still move, still think, still resist, they begin to notice it first. A day feels longer than it should. Then shorter. Then, indistinguishable from the one before it. Memories blur. Not erased. Not lost. Just flattened. Like pages pressed together until you can no longer tell where one ends and another begins. And everywhere, the still ones remain. More of them now. Far too many. Standing in places they were never meant to stay. Blocking hallways. Filling streets. Lining entire buildings. Not chaotic. Not random. Arranged. Positioned. As if part of something larger. Something deliberate. At first, the remaining few try to move them. Push them aside. Drag them away. But it doesn't work. Their bodies are heavy. Not physically, but impossibly resistant. Like trying to move something rooted far deeper than the ground beneath it. And the moment you try, the moment your hands make contact, you feel it. That same awareness. That same pull. Stronger now. Closer. It only takes seconds. Sometimes less. And then, another one joins them. Standing still. Facing. Watching. The world doesn't end. It transitions. Slowly. Quietly. Cities fall silent. Not from destruction, but from stillness. Cars remain parked in the middle of roads. Doors left open. Lights left on. Meals half eaten. Everything paused. As if life itself simply stopped mid-action. Except for one thing. The watching never stops. If anything, it intensifies. Because now, there are more eyes. More awareness. More points through which it sees. Through which it understands. Through which it remembers. And then comes the moment no one can explain. The moment no one sees coming. The moment everything shifts again. It begins with the sky. Not a dramatic change. Not at first. Just a subtle distortion. Barely noticeable. Like heat ripples on a distant horizon. But it doesn't fade. It grows. Slowly. Spreading. Until the blue of the sky seems thinner. Like something is behind it. Pressing against it. Watching through it. The few who are left. Those who haven't looked, haven't followed, haven't fully understood, they start to feel it immediately. A pressure. Not physical. Something deeper. Like their thoughts are being observed. Measured. Compared. And then, for the first time, it moves. Not the figures. Not the people. Something else. Something vast. The same presence seen in the recordings. The same shape hidden behind the trees. Behind the sky. Behind everything. It doesn't descend. It doesn't arrive. It simply becomes visible. Not fully. Never fully. But enough. Enough to know it's there. Enough to understand that it always has been. The sky darkens, not with clouds, but with form. An outline. Too large to comprehend. Too distant to grasp. And yet, too clear to ignore. The still ones react first. Not by moving, but by aligning. Their heads tilt. Just slightly. All of them. Across cities. Across countries. Across the entire world. Tilting upward. In perfect unison. Facing it. Acknowledging it. Recognizing it. The few who remain feel it immediately. That pull. Stronger than ever. Almost unbearable. Some fall to their knees. Others scream. Others run. Though there is nowhere left to go. And some, they look up. Just once. Just a glance. Just enough. And that's all it takes. Because now, there's nothing left to hide behind. No fog. No shadows. No distance. The truth is there. Open. Clear. Waiting. And when you see it, when you truly see it, everything makes sense. The swamp. The figures. The stillness. The watching. It was never spreading. It was revealing. Peeling back something that had always covered the